Okay, so I recorded a review, but I accidentally stopped and started over. So anyway. Hey guys, welcome to my first film review. The Lone Ranger. What did I think of it? So let's see. Where do I begin? The story it's about the Lone Ranger and Tonto fighting against criminals. Pretty much a basic story. It's pretty good. So, where do I begin? Tonto is an old man in the 1920s telling a story to a young kid who's visiting a Wild West exhibit at a carnival. He tells the story of the Lone Ranger and how he worked with him. Tonto, so let's see. It starts off with Tonto being held prisoner on board a prison car with Butch Cavendish, a notorious outlaw. Also on board the train is a law attorney named John Reed, whose brother Dan is a sheriff, waiting for the train to arrive at the station. But on this train, Butch Cavendish escapes, and John Reed and Tonto have to work together to go after him. Have to find a way to... Well, John Reed actually arrests Tonto because he was on the prison car. But he tries to get Butch Cavendish, but he's not able to. So, John Reed and his brother Dan have to team up in order to find him. Of course, John Reed doesn't like using guns, so that's a bit of a problem. That's character development right there. And when they do find Butch Cavendish, it turns out it's an ambush set up by a traitor named Collins. So, Dan dies and John dies. But because of the spirits, Tonto builds 7 graves, and he tries to bring Dan back, but this white horse comes along saying, he doesn't actually talk, but he says, "Hey, I want this guy." John Reed, "No, he's a sissy. I don't want him. I want Dan." "No, well, I want John, dude." "No, I want Dan." "Bitch, I said I wanted John. Don't make me kick your ass." Fine, you can take it. So, John is brought back to life as a spirit walker. So now, while he and Tonto have trouble getting along, they have to work together to go after Butch Cavendish. And meanwhile, there's a railroad man named Latham Cole looking after Dan Reed's family after he's killed by Butch Cavendish, which is pretty brutal, by the way. So, after Dan Reed's wife and son are attacked by Indians, they investigate Tonto and, hold on a sec. Okay, that's the phone, sorry. Sorry about that, folks. So anyway, so let's see. John Reed and Tonto go after Butch, try to investigate these Indians, and it turns out that they're just a couple of guys, that they're actually Butch Cavendish's gang. And so they get some help from this lady named Red, who has a gun for a leg, which is pretty cool. And, well, that happens before they go after the Indians, who turned out to be Butch Cavendish's gang. So they find Butch Cavendish at a silver mine. And so, after a confrontation, Tonto is knocked out, and Lone Ranger tries to... So after an encounter with the Indians, Lone Ranger, the real Indians, Lone Ranger discovers Tonto's origin story. He traded all the silver on the other side of the river for a watch given to him by a man in a bowler hat. 2 men. One of them had a bowler hat, which is really strange. So Tonto's people were killed by these 2 men, and he's upset, always carrying a burden with the crow on his head as a reminder of his people. So now, after encountering with the Indians and getting Butch Cavendish tied up in the silver mine, Lone Ranger takes him to the city, to the railroad man, Latham Cole, where it turns out that Butch Cavendish and Latham Cole are working together. and Latham Cole is in charge. He's also got the U.S. cavalry on the Union cavalry on his side, so that's pretty bad. So they try to execute John Reed, or the Lone Ranger, but Tonto rescues him, and so they try to go after Latham Cole, who tries to buy the whole railroad with a bunch of silver. And when the railroad companies refuse, he shoots the guy that's currently in charge and is like, "We're gonna need nominations, people." So they're like, "Hey, I want this guy." I accept. Thank you. And the guys are like, "Douchebag." So anyway, after a brief encounter, Tonto steals the Constitution, Latham Cole's train, if you recognize the Lego set. So they steal the Constitution, Latham Cole goes after them on another train, and so the final battle occurs. Lone Ranger kills Butch Cavendish, finally has the balls to kill Butch Cavendish with his horse Silver. Butch Cavendish dies in a crash. Latham Cole is killed by Tonto, where it turns out that Latham Cole is the one that gave Tonto the watch in exchange for the silver. So that kind of makes him Tonto's archenemy. Sidekick's archenemy is the main villain. Really weird, but okay. And then Dan Reed's family is brought home, and Lone Ranger and Tonto ride off into the desert. And that's Lone Ranger. So cast. Armie Hammer did a pretty good job as Lone Ranger. I thought he did alright, actually. I thought he was okay, but he's not who I would have picked for the role. The same goes for Johnny Depp as Tonto, who was ridiculously funny, and I liked him as Tonto, but he wouldn't have been my first choice. So, yeah. William Fichtner as Butch Cavendish played a really good sleazeball that you just want to hate, that you just love to hate. That you took something from me, I'm gonna take something from you. The way he kills Dan Reed is pretty gruesome for a Disney movie, so don't take your kids to see it. Tom Wilkinson as Latham Cole was pretty good. He's a good actor. He did a wonderful job playing a villain that had noble intentions, but didn't quite get the memo when he tried to take over. But doesn't quite get the good guy memo, so he's the bad guy, pretty much. Then there's the U.S. Cavalryman, who is a bit of a stereotype. Native Americans were pretty good. James Badge Dale, who played Dan Reed, the character that dies, he did a pretty good job. He did a good job playing a cowboy. He looks way different than he did when he played that character and when he played Cold Blood in Iron Man 3. That was pretty good. He did a good job in The Lone Ranger. Let's see, who else? The little kid in the movie was actually really good for a kid actor. He's like, "Is my daddy dead? Why did he have to point a gun at somebody? Jeez." So anyway, Lone Ranger overall is a really good movie. It's a great time. Don't listen to other critics, because I enjoyed it. As a fan of movies and a fan of superheroes, I loved The Lone Ranger. It was really good. 4 out of 5 stars. Not perfect, but it was awesome. Good enough. Definitely recommend seeing it in the theaters. This is JokerFan45 signing off, and I'll see you later.